Screening on the 30th of July as part of the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival is a film called The Trustful, Julian Assange. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the director of The Trustful, Kym Staton. Kym, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good to talk to you, and this is quite a searing documentary about the incarceration of Julian Assange and his the attempts at extradition to the US. How did it all come about that you made this documentary?
Well, I've been following Julian's story loosely for quite a few years, but really hadn't looked deeply into it until it was in 2021. My partner and I went to a talk that John Shipton, Julian's father, was giving in Mullumbimby. And I was at the time thinking about making a film about Julian. And we went along to that talk, and John was describing the situation at the beginning of the extradition hearing, where Julian was kept in a glass dock at the back of the court, and that really shocked me. And my partner and I just kind of looked at each other, and then afterwards, after the talk, we just talked about it. We just said we really have to do something about it, whatever we can do. And I've been involved in the documentary industry for about 6 years before that. So was thinking about making a film, and decided to take on this topic.
Okay, very good. What made you decide to plot it the way you did, to put in the elements that are there, the interviews, the archival footage, etc.?
Well, from the outset, I didn't want to do a film that was strictly chronological, because there's been many of those, and that's just a very kind of common way to do a documentary. And I really wanted to have time and space to get into the meaning and interpretation of what has happened, and look more into that rather than just the what and the when, but more of the why. So that was the starting point. And even though the second chapter of the film does have a recap of the whole story, just in a 5-minute time frame, the rest of the film is all about what we can learn from it, and all the wider issues.
Well, it certainly is, as I mentioned, a searing film, because there is no room for alternative points of view. You're very strong about how badly Julian Assange has been treated, and that the potential for him to be extradited and to be incarcerated for 100 years or whatever is just incredible. So tell me about all of that, and especially talking to people like Daniel Ellsberg and John Pilger, who I've spoken to in the past about various issues, etc. Very political people, I suppose.
Yeah, well, another big difference about the film was that I decided really early, it was actually after the very first interview, that I wouldn't be doing the conventional thing of having sort of a position of neutrality and showing both sides of the story. And the reason for that is because as soon as I looked into it,
Okay, Kym, your screen has frozen.
It's such a clear sense of persecution and oppression and brutality and sort of grotesque, disgusting treatment of Julian that I really can't give any more airtime to to the other side, the oppressors. To me, I have to equate it to something like, like any kind of form of abuse, whether it's abuse of of animals, or, I mean, imagine taking the side of the oppressor if there's a school bully, right? And it's not a fair fight. It just didn't seem fair, actually, to give voice to these oppressors once I started looking into it, and that seems a bit strange to outsiders that don't know the full story. But if you watch the film, you will see why. It really is a big case of David and Goliath, and Goliath doesn't need any help at all because they have all of the control of the mainstream media. They've been able to paint Julian as something that he is not, and use all kinds of smears and lawfare and all sorts of tactics against him. And it's David and Goliath, and I choose to stand with David. And if people see the film or look more into the story, whether it's through this film or other films or some of the brilliant books that have been written on the topic, you just realize that there's really nothing to fault about Julian's actions or his character or anything that he's done. So I couldn't give them any time. There's too much time to be spent actually defending him and trying to clear his name. So that was the reasoning behind that other uniqueness about the film. And then the choice of narrators, interviewees. Well, in this campaign, you have so many brilliant minds and highly articulate people. You mentioned Daniel Ellsberg, John Pilger, Tariq Ali, Stella Assange, who does a great job defending her husband and with her lawyer background, and so many others, Chris Hedges and Jennifer Robinson from the law angle. And so what I was able to do was sort of plan out all the topics that we were going to cover, and then be able to have somebody who specializes in that area to comment on those areas. And in a lot of documentaries, you might have sort of 5 to 10 people that are interviewed, and people are commenting on things that are not their field of expertise. But the luxury I've had with this film is that when we're talking about the law, it's Jennifer Robertson. When we're talking about whistleblowing, it's the legendary Daniel Ellsberg. If we're talking about journalism, it's John Pilger. And they just stick almost entirely strictly to their area of expertise. And I think that's a big value to the film, to have people just talking to their knowledge and to their experience.
Well, you certainly build a very strong case in your film. And in fact, it seems pretty comprehensive. I mean, it runs for, 2.25 hours or something like that. So you certainly have presented pretty much all the evidence as to why Julian Assange needs to be freed.
Yeah, look, it's a very, it's kind of the whole topic is sort of simultaneously very simple and very complex, and that's something that I realized that I need to do, is try to simplify it as much as possible, but also provide as much detail as possible. I think something that happens is when people try to catch up on the story or understand the situation through, for example, reading a news article, after a few sentences, you get lost in all the political jargon and all the complicated aspects of it, the law side of it. And it was the same for me at the beginning. And after a while, I managed to sort of piece it together like a jigsaw. But then I really wanted to make it as clear as possible through the editing process, through the organization of all the content, all the statements. So I think we spent a lot more time than you would normally spend with the editing, over 600 hours already, and a lot of that was spent organizing all the information to be as clear and easy to follow as possible, because it is an educational film, and we want people to be able to digest it. But also we're wary of not making it cold and dry and political, and it's actually a very warm film that is heartfelt, emotional. It's quite an earthy film, even has a sense of the big universal issues, and it's a very humanitarian film. It's there's a lot of delving into the world peace side, the peace activist side of Julian's work, to end wars, and not too much into the law and getting stuck in the legal case, because even as Jennifer Robinson, the lawyer, one of Julian's lawyers, has said in the film, that this is not.
Screen's frozen again.
Sorry, Peter, we do have patchy internet here, so you might have to do a little bit of editing.
That's all right. That's okay. No, I understand. Look, I was wondering how much production you had behind you, because you've used animation in the film. You've got Roger Waters, who does a lot of the narration. So I was wondering how much support you had.
We've had 3 editors involved and 6 animators. And my partner is the co-producer, so it is quite a small team compared to a lot of films, and we've had many videographers, because to cut costs, I actually hired videographers in that whatever city we were, rather than traveling with one videographer or 2 videographers. So but quite a small team to put it all together. And but with in total there's 8 animations in the film, and that was done by 6 animators, and the co-producer and I pretty much came up with all of the ideas, but lots of input from our editors as well, who really did a fantastic job.
Yes. And Roger Waters?
Yeah, Roger Waters is one of the narrators. I think you might have watched the version, the rough cut, before we put in the second narrator, which is MIA, a UK rapper, which makes a nice contrast. She's a female, a young female voice, whereas Roger is a mature male voice. And we do have some other narrators that are just still preparing their narration before we do the actual theatrical release. But it's fantastic to have those famous voices in there, and that was something that we planned out about a year ago to aim for, that we could hopefully get some well-known voices.
Okay, very good. Yes, you're frozen again, but we'll see how we go. I was just wondering, the politics of the film. Will you be hoping that government will look at this and perhaps act?
Well, if Anthony Albanese and Joe Biden watch the film, that would be extraordinary. I do encourage them to watch it. But I think part of the aim of the film is to raise awareness amongst the public, and perhaps if enough people watch it, it will increase the political pressure, and particularly in Australia, UK, and the US, and just play a small part in that rapid growth of awareness and political pressure. And I think one possible solution to this problem for Julian Assange to get free is that this issue becomes an election issue at the next election in these respective countries. I'm not sure what it's going to take for that to occur, because there seems like a lot of ignorance amongst the leaders of the issue.
Okay, we're just frozen again. All right.
Sorry,
Yeah.
where did I lose you there?
Yeah, you're just talking about the leaders reacting and acting.
Yeah, so as a lot of people know, Anthony Albanese, prior to being elected Prime Minister, he had these words, "Enough is enough," and then there was a lot of optimism raised amongst the supporters of that once he was became Prime Minister, that he would do something significant to help Julian. But what we've seen is that it was rhetoric, and it was kind of weasel words, cryptic sort of stuff that he's trying to toe the line between the supporters and the allies of Australia and the US in particular. So yeah, what we really to see is for Albanese to take a stronger stance and actually come out and be brave enough to say, well, this is an Australian citizen and he's a journalist and he should be free, and actually use something like a bit of gumption to get something done, rather than just doing the merry dance along the fence.
Yes, that whole notion of journalists being protected and so on, that's a very important point. What made you decide to call the film The Trustful?
Well, when I was working on the narration for about the last year, for a couple of months I was writing something every day and just kind of coming up with ideas and imagining different sort of metaphors and things, and I did plan to make the final chapter, particularly just the final chapter of the film, a little bit sort of philosophical or like a speech, even a little bit poetic. And so one of these concepts I came up with was based around this sense of risk and trust, and sort of this idea that if Julian knew the consequences, the possible consequences of his actions in publishing these leaks and these war crimes and so on, if he was aware of the risk, then it's a huge kind of sacrifice that he's made for the sake of public awareness for the public. And then I kind of thought of this sort of action that is done at some of these. I've heard of this thing. I've not done it myself, but sometimes at team building exercises, they do this thing where you basically close your eyes and fall backwards into a group, and that's where that term comes from, the trustful. I had to look it up. I'm sure a lot of people do as well, and that's something that we want, is a bit of intrigue in the title. I think that helps if the title is sort of a mystery. But as far as the meaning of it, well, yeah, as I've said, I feel that Julian made an incredible risk, and there's a lot of trust involved. And so it's really sort of a reference to whistleblowers, the act of whistleblowing or publishing, in that the whistleblower needs to trust the public to support them, to get behind them, to back them up. And so, yeah, there's words in the film around that, and there's also a chapter about the consequences, Julian's awareness of the consequences and the risks that he was taking. And that's one of the main points that we really want to bring home in the film, is that he did know the consequences and the risks and what might happen, and he kind of expected it to happen and did it anyway, which is incredibly brave and courageous, and he's very much worthy of our support, and it's well overdue.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Now, as you mentioned, you've got so much footage. Tell me about the editing process, because it obviously is not an easy job.
Yeah, well, we did 23 interviews of about an hour each. So we had 23 hours of interview footage, and then oodles of archive. We had a lot of archive footage donated to us, and other stuff we had to go and look for and license. We had some volunteers involved with that, which I'm very grateful to Susanna and Charlotte for helping out with that. And I just trawled through so much archive looking for sort of particular moments and parts of speeches and things, because we did want Julian to be very prominent in the film, even though we can't film him. Of course, he hasn't actually been in front of a camera for about 4 years now, since they threw him into a van and carried him off to Belmarsh prison. So very reliant on archive footage, but there's so much magical stuff, and you really get an insight into Julian's incredible ideas, his philosophy, and his intellect and his brilliance as well. So yeah, bits of archive are littered throughout the film. There's photos that have never been seen before. We also have interview footage from some of the victims of the collateral murder incident, which have never been seen before. So, and I did hope that would happen through the process, that we might be offered footage, provided some footage and photos and things that hadn't been seen, and so we were very fortunate to be able to put that into the film. And yeah, I mean, then it's just many hours, hundreds of hours in the editing suite. But I do feel that I think that the whole project has been quite sort of accelerated, because I did want to get it finished as soon as possible. I didn't feel like I can kind of meander along and fuss over it to the nth degree, and also I couldn't have it carry on for years, because we need to help Julian as soon as possible. So it's all been sort of pushed along, but I've also been really driven with a sort of a really clear vision of what I was going for. So I think that helped speed up a lot of the decisions. And we've also had a lot of support from our crowdfunders and investors, which has enabled me to work full time. I mean, more like 60 plus hours a week for sort of the past year and a half. And that's another thing that I'm very grateful for, because I know a lot of filmmakers have to do it part-time and juggle other projects, but I was able to focus completely on it for a year and a half out of the 2 years.
Wow.
So all of that has kind of accelerated it along to where we are now, with the world premiere only 4 days away now.
Yes, exactly, on the 30th of July at the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival, which is terrific. Are you hoping and planning to roll the film out elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. We're still working on the strategy, and we're still just talking to the distributors and working out who's going to distribute the film and how it will be done. But it's always been intended for a theatrical release after the festivals, and not to stay too long in the festival circuit, like just as long as needed before we launch off into the cinemas. We are hoping that it will get a mainstream cinema release in Australia, New Zealand, yeah, and UK, America. If there's ever been a time when these mainstream cinemas should be covering this story, it's now. There's so much awareness and support for Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. So optimistic of that, and ultimately, yeah, we'll go through the whole process: festivals, theatrical, streaming, television, and reach as many people as possible. And we'll translate it into many languages, maybe up to 100 languages or more throughout that process, because WikiLeaks work it's relevant to the whole planet, to every country. And there is interest across the entire world for this story, for the issue of free speech, for the issue of world peace.
Definitely. I wish you well on all that, and certainly I hope the screening goes well at the Nova Cinema for the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival on Sunday, the 30th of July. And we've been speaking to the director of the Trustful Julian Assange, Kym Staton. Kym, thank you so much for talking with me.
My pleasure, Peter. Thanks for having me.
All the best. See you later.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.